Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It's time to have a look at a new Chinese vehicle that is coming in, another fighter bomber, this one the JH-7A. It's going to be coming in at rank 8 and also will be probably after the Q5, and so will make the Q5L a little bit easier to grind, especially since it's pretty tough to do at the moment. The JH-7 comes in with a lot of different armaments and looking really strong for what it's designed to do, and I'm sure many high-tier ground players for China are looking forward to its various ordnance options. Let's have a look at the history of this vehicle. After several years of development, China finalized the development of its own fighter bomber, the JH-7, which ticked all of the boxes that were set out by PLA Command for an aircraft to replace the outdated Q5. In 1999, following orders from the Central Military Committee, work began on creating an improved version of the JH-7. This extensive modernization program included 303 changes, which included improving the fire control system with the introduction of a digital electronic sighting system, as well as increasing the range of its suspended weapons. This updated fighter bomber, now designated the JH-7A, made its first flight in 2002 and began entering service in October of 2004. The JH-7A aircraft are still currently serving in the Chinese Air Force. So the JH-7A coming in has access to pretty much everything you would want from an aviation to a ground setting, which actually might hamper it a little bit going forward, because we've talked about this previously. When vehicles have really good loadouts, that feels great, but also it means that they go a lot higher in BR than maybe you would want them to be because of these loadouts. So sometimes it's actually better to hamper vehicles in little ways so they can actually be lower BR and more useful in certain areas. With the JH-7A, Gaijin have just decided to give it pretty much everything. So it has access to the PL-5Cs and also the PL-8s, which are, of course, fantastic sets of missiles. So it has the top-tier Chinese missiles that exist in the game right now for air-to-air combat, even though the vehicle itself is a fighter bomber. If you compare this, for example, for the F-111, imagine if the F-111 was given AIM-9Ls instead of just AIM-9Bs. That would be kind of what's happening when it comes to the JH-7. Maybe in the future we'll get an F-111 which will be a bit higher with stuff like that, but with the JH-7A coming in with this stuff, it basically means that now it's only going to be there for the highest echelon of China. And then, also on top of these air-to-air missiles, which are the best, it is also getting a bunch of laser-guided bombs with its targeting pod in tow as well. So it's getting the LS-500J and also the LS-1000J, and with the targeting pod will be incredibly good in ground forces. China, when it comes to top tier, has been getting better and better and better as time has gone on, and it's something that I talked about for years, that China has it probably has the most room for growth over, the next few years for what they can actually add to it. Them and also America and Russia being tied for this wonderful, this wonderful setting. And China's one of those that many people sleep on, even though they have really powerful lineups at a lot of BRs now, and also is a fantastic, nation to be able to get into for, newer players, because they have so much to offer. The other thing is they have a ton of rockets and also a ton of just standard bombs, which I'm sure this vehicle will have access to CCIP and probably CCRP. Being a early 2000s vehicle, China now has some of the most modern vehicles in the game when it comes to jets. Did already have, by the way, with the J8, but now with the JH-7A, it's kind of confirmed that that is the case. This vehicle will be fast, it will be mobile, it'll have pretty much everything that you would want from a vehicle. But as I said, this might actually limit the vehicle in weird, odd ways. We went through a period in War Thunder where strike aircraft were incredibly dominant in their air-to-air role. Basically vehicles which had access to really good weaponry, but also didn't have access to great, mobility, because they didn't have great engines or anything like that. Stuff like the Su-25, the A-10, even stuff like the A-5C, where they have these crazy amounts of really good weaponry on them. They have ways of defending themselves through countermeasures, and then when it comes to it, they also weren't exactly crazy quick, or they weren't exactly, able to maneuver around against a lot of the vehicles they face. So nowadays, since those vehicles have gone up in BR, they've lost a little bit of their spice, but they're still really good. They're still fantastic. But then they brought in the next stage. Stuff like the Su-39, the Su-25T, the Su-25BM. And these type of strike aircraft get eaten alive, and really find it very hard to actually be useful in an air-to-air role. And even in an air-to-ground role, they need air superiority or silly DMs which don't work properly to actually make them useful. Things like the JH-7A with the guided bombs will always be useful in a ground setting, but when it comes to that air setting, you're now putting it up against vehicles which are just so much better than it. And that is the thing. And you're trying to compensate with these changes with the best missiles, for the Chinese tech tree. And the question is, will it be able to actually, conquer this stuff? And at the end of the day, it also doesn't have access to semi-actives or active radar homing, which is, of course, part of the meta of the high echelon. So you'll have to stay low to the ground. You'll have to specifically dogfight away from those things. And since it's such a large target and won't obviously be able to break radar lock either if it's going towards enemies, then it's going to be super hard to deal with this thing from that point of view. The thing is, this is going to mainly be facing F-16s and MiG-29s, and it's just going to get eaten alive by both sets of those vehicles. The real place where this thing will completely take over is, of course, at high-tier ground, which is where you want this thing to set up. After they nerfed a lot of the missiles from many of the SAMs, after they also improved the way that a lot of targeting pods worked, and also they improved the way that laser guided bombs go in, this thing will be an absolute terror in the ground forces portion. The only real question about it is, will it still be useful in air, even after all the changes that have come in? My guess is you'll get lucky sometimes with, firing the missiles off at enemies, but the vast majority of the time you're going to get beaten by vehicles which are designed to fill that role instead of what you're designed for, which is much more ground striking opportunities. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Brendan Quinn, Vilneus, Character Fuel, Juan the Panda, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Merciless Reaper, Orange Tail, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Moxie, B. Young, Bareen, Peter Grayling, Alan Hacker, Sem Alslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R, and also Lafouche for supporting the channel.